Praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever. Even though I have an almost pathological dislike of the theme, which in decades past used to be a feature of so much liturgical nonsense, the reality is that as one works through the scriptures or readings of the saints during a particular season, genuine themes one hopes inspired by the Holy Spirit do often emerge. One Advent we might find ourselves thinking of the saints of Advent, or have a special focus on her who is preeminent in all our thoughts of Christmas, our Blessed Lady. Last year, as you might recall, various pieces of poetry helped me prepare for Christmas, which I shared with you in the Nuggets. This Advent, as we approach the third Sunday, called Gaudete Sunday, a day of anticipated Christmas joy, to remind us of the great feast of Christmas which is on the horizon, it's become clear that the focus for me this year is that sense of being in that in-between time of waiting for the Lord's final coming, while celebrating with joy his universe-changing coming at the Incarnation on December the 25th. This time, whether it be tomorrow or in 500 years, is the time of our Christian lives, to be lived in the hope of heaven, but fully on the only earth that we know. Without being gloomy but realistic, this means we believers must have a very healthy sense of the reality of our own demise. Not, as I said, in a sense of imminent gloom, living lives of misery until we leave this mortal coil, but also not in this strange culture of death that we live in, which denies death, tries to avoid thinking or speaking of death, and somehow believes some sort of earthly eternity can be created. Surely, as I've said before, this was both the awful experience of the COVID crisis and the terrible failure of the Church to seize the moment to preach the life-giving doctrine of the hope that Christianity brings. Thinking these thoughts, as God so often does, a word was provided by reading some words of St. Augustine, provided for the feast of St. Nicholas on December the 4th. St. Augustine wrote, "If death troubled us a little, or not at all, the glory of the martyrs would not be so great." Enough food for thought in that one line for the week, but he goes on, "The love of Christ must increase to such an intensity that it overcomes the natural fear of death." What words of wisdom to meditate upon. The first, so helpful, is his acknowledgement that the fear of death is natural. Of course it is, we might say. But that helps us not to develop a pietistic approach to the reality of death, which has nothing to do with the reality of human loss, suffering, and the terrible pain of grief. Death does trouble us, much more than a little. It is in fact the cause of most of our woes, addictions, sins, and false hopes for happiness. This is precisely why, indeed, the martyrs are glorious. These men, women, and children through the centuries, and enduring martyrdom in great numbers even now, conquered the fear of death for one reason, their love of Christ. Therefore, Augustine tells us that our love for Christ must increase to such an intensity that it overcomes the natural fear of death. That, it seems, is a powerful and much needed intention to pray for this Advent, and the perfect gift to ask for at Christmas. Brethren, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, like a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour.